It was a blistering summer afternoon along the dusty roads of southern Arizona, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer with a heat haze, distorting the landscape in ways that made the horizon appear like an endless warping mirage. The border crossing between the United States and Mexico was quiet too quiet, as if the dry desert air had absorbed all the noise and chaos that normally plagued such places. A solitary figure stood just off the asphalt, leaning against the faded wooden sign marking the international boundary. His name was Jack Rivas, a former Special Forces soldier who now found solace in solitude. The camel backpack resting on his back contained everything he needed for the time being: water, a few snacks, and a couple of hand-stitched letters from old friends he rarely heard from anymore. His weathered face was partly obscured by a scruffy beard, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of a black baseball cap that had seen better days. He wasn't a man prone to nostalgia, but sometimes, when the silence pressed in, memories of his old life as a soldier surfaced, training in distant lands, feeling the weight of combat and the unspoken camaraderie that only soldiers could understand. But that life was far behind him now. Jack had no intention of crossing the border. He wasn't looking for trouble. He wasn't looking for anything, really. Just peace. But trouble found him anyway. The first rumble of engines reached Jack's ears long before the motorcycles appeared on the horizon. The sound grew louder with each passing second, a deep growl that reverberated across the dry landscape. He straightened up and squinted into the distance, a slight frown forming on his face. A pack of bikers, heavily tattooed and dressed in leather, rode toward the border crossing. There were 5 of them in total, their motorcycles kicking up clouds of dust behind them. The leader, a man with a thick beard and a patch on his leather jacket reading Hell's Nomads, led the pack. His eyes were hidden behind dark sunglasses, but Jack could feel the cocky energy radiating from him as they approached. The rest of the gang followed closely, their bikes roaring like predators on the hunt. Jack wasn't a fan of bikers, not for any personal reason, but because they often drew unwanted attention wherever they went. He had seen enough chaos in his time as a soldier to know when things were about to go south. And from the looks of these men, trouble was definitely on the horizon. The group of bikers slowed as they neared the border crossing, their engines echoing against the concrete barriers and empty desert landscape. The leader of the gang, the one with the patch, slowed to a stop directly in front of Jack, eyeing him like a lion sizing up a wounded deer. "Hey, soldier," the man called out in a voice laced with mockery. His sunglasses reflected the harsh sunlight, but there was no mistaking the arrogance in his tone. "What's a guy like you doing in a place like this? You lost or just looking for some trouble?" Jack didn't respond immediately. He was used to people making assumptions about him. He didn't owe this man an answer, especially not one that would satisfy whatever twisted sense of superiority he had. Instead, he just let the silence hang in the air, his arms crossed, his stance unwavering. The biker grinned and revved his engine, the sound rattling the air around them. "Yeah, I thought so. You military types always think you're something special, don't ya? What's the deal, huh? You think you can stand in the middle of the road like some kind of hero, just waiting for your next mission?" One of the other bikers, a lanky man with a nose ring, let out a loud laugh from behind. "I think the soldier's scared, man. He probably doesn't want any of this." Jack remained calm, his expression unchanged. He had been in situations much worse than this, and he wasn't about to let a group of overgrown children get under his skin. Still, he knew how this would play out. The bikers would push, they would provoke, and they would try to drag him into a confrontation. He didn't want that, but he also wasn't afraid of it. Without saying a word, Jack stepped back, his boots scraping against the gravel. He moved in a way that exuded confidence, a confidence that came from years of combat, of knowing exactly how to react in any situation. The biker leader leaned forward, squinting at Jack. I don't think you understand, soldier. We're not asking. We're telling. Get out of the way before we make you. Something inside Jack snapped. His years of training kicked in, and he was no longer just a man standing at a border crossing. He was a soldier who had spent years fighting against enemies far more dangerous than this group of fools. Without warning, Jack moved in a blur of motion. The first biker, the one with the nose ring, reached for his jacket. But Jack was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it sharply to the side. The biker yelped in pain as his weapon, a small switchblade, clattered to the ground. Before the others could react, Jack had the man on the ground, his knee pinning his chest. The biker leader's eyes widened in surprise as his gang members struggled beneath Jack's weight. What the hell, man, get off him! He yelled. Revving his engine again, Jack didn't budge. His eyes never left the leader. You don't want to do this, he said in a low, calm voice. This isn't a game. I'm not your enemy, but if you push me, I'll treat you like one. For a moment, there was an eerie stillness. The other bikers watched, with a mixture of confusion and admiration. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected Jack to fight back so decisively. The leader cursed under his breath, his fingers tightening around the handle of a heavy chain he had wrapped around his waist. He swung it toward Jack, but Jack was ready. He dodged the chain with a swift sidestep, grabbed it midair, and yanked it out of the leader's hands with a force that sent the man stumbling backward. Last chance, Jack warned, his voice cold and firm. You walk away and we don't have a problem. But if you stay, this is going to get a lot worse for you. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. The leader's bravado was crumbling, his confidence waning as he realized he had underestimated Jack. The other men looked between their leader and Jack, unsure of what to do. With a final, furious growl, the leader climbed back onto his bike. This isn't over. Solji spat. We'll see you around as the bikers roared away, disappearing into the dust and heat of the desert. Jack stood alone at the border crossing, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. He didn't want to fight. He didn't want any of this. But in the end, he knew that sometimes trouble found you whether you were looking for it or not. Jack Rivas had walked away victorious, not because he was the toughest guy in the world, but because he knew how to survive. And in the end, that was all that mattered. He looked out across the dusty horizon, the sun setting in the distance, and felt a flicker of peace wash over him once again. The border crossing was quiet now, just the way he liked it.